Welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. As we gear up for the 2020 elections, there are a lot of different races to pay attention to. One in our very own backyard is Congressional District 3, which was a Republican stronghold for 50 years. Today we have in studio, friend of mine, gotten to know him very well, Kendall Qualls, who is running for that seat in Congress. Kendall, thank you for joining the Republican Roundtable.
Absolutely, Max. Thank you for inviting me.
The natural first question that I ask every one of these candidates, especially when you're running for Congress, is who are you and why the heck are you running for Congress?
Oh, that's a great question. A little about my background. So, no political experience at all. However, I can tell you that this country means a lot to me personally. I love this country. What I have been able to do is literally coming from nothing from a background. I came from abject poverty to being able to work for a Fortune 100 company, vice president of one of their business units, $850 million of responsibility, P&L responsibility, and I can only do that in this country. So to kind of give you a little bit more specifics, when my father came back from Vietnam, my parents divorced. I had to move to our grandparents' home, along with my siblings, to Harlem, New York. This was in the late 60s. It was absolutely horrific. Yeah. We got off the Greyhound bus, moved into in the earlier phase of the city of Harlem, and before we even got to our grandparents' home, we were held up in broad daylight. I mean, suitcases and all. That was my
at gunpoint.
Absolutely. This was wow. This was my first exposure to the city, to New York. I was five years old, heading into first grade, about that age. So I lived there for 3 years in elementary school, and just feeling the actual effects of living in the inner city at its worst. After living there for about 3 years, I went to live with my father, who was still in the active duty, still in the Army. And actually, he was living in a trailer at the time because all he could afford was, a trailer because he was paying alimony and child support. And, just really dire circumstances as a young child. But the one thing I did have was a desire to improve my lot in life, I can tell you, even at that age. And I was able to do that. I went to school, and went to college. I worked full time to pay for school, joined the Army Reserves, really got some good leadership training at an early age. And after graduation, I went on active duty. I served for 5 years here in the U.S. as well as South Korea.
So you are the epitome of what we would call the American success story. You mentioned before, Kendall, that you could not have gotten to the place you are now in life had it not been for this country. You had served in the military. You are choosing to try to serve again in Congress. What specifically about the state of this country, the state of Minnesota, has prompted you to do that?
Sure. If you take a look, I think about my background and my experiences. So my wife and I, we have 5 kids. I've been married for 33 years. Been very fortunate and blessed, to be born in this country. And I would not have had that opportunity if the doors were not wide open from the private sector standpoint. Really, the engines that really drive our country is on the private side of our society.
You mean it's not government that does that?
Well, exactly. There are members of my family, people that I know that went that route, and I can just tell you that to be able to provide for my family, where my wife could stay home, I could earn enough money to not only care for them, but actually donate and helping causes, helping to give back in my own community. Of the 5 children we have, we adopted one of them. We were able to do that because of the income I was able to earn. I always tell people I can't remember which one because I love them all the same. But it's really about that. I mean, only in the private sector could you actually accomplish those things. And I want to make sure that those doors remain open for people behind me and for the rest of the people in this country. And I'm here to make sure that I explain to those people that may feel like socialism may be a route, to explain why it's not. and how they actually achieve their successes and dreams through the private sector route.
We'll get into issues and some hot button issues that you're hearing in the district in a little bit here, Kendall, but I wanted to touch on something that I think you highlighted, that gratitude, that feeling of gratitude for being here in America with opportunities ahead of you. It seems to me that it's becoming more and more mainstream, like you said, to believe in this idea of socialism, but to also get very cynical about prospects, about being able to propel yourself forward. Within that, understanding that you came from where you came from, what drives that? What drives that mentality, do you think, from the other side that says America is not great, America is not special? Are you seeing that, one, on the campaign trail? And then two, why do you think people believe something different than what you believe about this country?
Sure. Unfortunately, we have a media that bombards the public with that narrative. We have one side of the political spectrum that bombards the public with that narrative. Unfortunately, we even have someone here in our local politics that as soon as she got into Congress, find faults and everything else with our country. And I've always said, for someone that came to this country as a refugee, and we actually literally saved her life and her family's life, you would think there'd be a little bit more gratitude with that attitude. I think it frustrates not only me, but a lot of Americans to see someone really not being appreciative of the generosity of this country. Here's what I can tell you is that I think our school systems, and again, as I mentioned, the public narrative, is that the system is rigged against people like me, people like not just me, but a lot of Americans. You can't make it anymore. And I just think that we don't do a good job on our side of the aisle, if you will, and amongst others, to educate people that that the capitalist system is the way to go. It's always not easy. It's not a straight line up, if you will. It can be messy at times when we're disrupting technologies. But every country around the world, nearly every country around the world, is shifting to this form of economic system, not going the socialism route. Literally, if you look at all of Asia,
yes,
they have really shifted to this economic engine that we have from a free market, free access, free enterprise standpoint.
It's been interesting to observe China. There's been a lot of news about China lately, and in many cases, it's still a communist dictatorship at the very top.
Right.
But my goodness, they're working on markets right now. It's why their economy is growing to a certain extent.
In my roles, I've been to Malaysia. I've been to several countries around the world, and you should see the construction cranes that are in these small countries that are going toward capitalism, the free market, free enterprise. Again, what we need to do is make sure that the younger generation appreciates how that works here in this country and what are the best ways to get there.
Kendall, so talking specifically about this seat in Congress, it's western suburbs. It reaches from north to south, basically the entire metro west of Minneapolis, and then you can exclude St. Louis Park and things of that nature. The district for a very, very long time was under Republican control, and in some cases safely. In other cases, it got a little hazy there. But for the first time this past election cycle, a Democrat won the seat. Two questions stem from that. Why do you think that happened? And then two, how do you think you bring a different message to the situation to flip the seat back to what it was?
Sure. It's interesting, and you know what, and I'll tie this into a little bit of the comments that were from last night's presidential debate.
Okay.
So Andrew Yang said something cryptic. I don't know, no one's called him out on it, but he said, you know what, I understand why President Trump was elected. The economy was in shambles. These are his words, not mine. The country was in shambles.
You're not supposed to say those words as a Democrat, Kendall.
That's right. The country was in shambles, so he understands why the country voted for Donald Trump. So, number one, the reason why I believe the country voted for him is, number one, the economy, number one. Number two, I think a lot of people, Americans, were frustrated with the conventional standard wisdom of politics. So there was two dynamics driving that. Now, you asked the question about the midterm. Why did we lose the seat? Again, I think I go back to that very same nature. I think President Trump is a very different politician. I would say he's not a politician at all. His way of communicating is very different from a lot of the norms that we're used to. And so, obviously, very caustic in some of the things he has to say. And I think it grinds against the nature of a lot of people that feel that his comments might be considered bullying. So, again, that's the main driver. I can tell you, I voted for President Trump. I plan to vote for him again. I just tell you that my style of communication, my style of leadership is very different. And I think that's why that we can have a different kind of results coming into this next election. The main reason is, number one, I think people will start to notice that, well, his results are actually something different than what they expected.
Absolutely.
I know people that did not vote for President Trump that plan to vote for him this time around. The second component of why we think we can win this election is that the entry of the new Democrats taking control of the House, they have gone so far left, embracing socialism, which I think from the profile of the 3rd Congressional District, there's a lot of good, strong companies here that want to hire, very innovative and creative in what they're putting out. And socialism is not one of the things they're embracing.
You had brought up the debate that happened, and by the time this airs on television, it will have been, a week or two past. But that debate, Kendall, I thought was a really interesting case study in what the Democrat Party has become. They are talking about a number of different issues: single-payer health care, which would decimate our district. Everyone was talking taxes. No one was talking about things of substance. It was all really, really disturbing in my mind. Why is that view for America and that vision for America wrong for CD3 in particular?
Well, again, CD3. If you think about the companies we have here, I've lived all over the country, and I've been blessed to be an adopted son, if you will, of Minnesota. Rarely do you find economies where they are so diverse, from medical, from retail, from agribusiness. You just don't see that in a lot of different markets. This place is very different. And we have things in the agenda that's waiting for Congress to put on, to put on the president's desk for signature. The USMCA, NAFTA 2.0, if you will. We're just waiting for that to be signed. Mexico and Canada already have signed it, and they're waiting for us. Because of all the things that Congress is doing, from impeachment to all the other socialist things, that for example, is not getting passed. The permanent repeal of the medical device tax, which has bipartisan support, is not getting passed because of the other agendas moving forward. I think all of the things that are mentioned at the presidential debate level, I think it's going to struggle here in the 3rd District.
And I think one of those issues in particular, and polling actually reflects this as well, with how comfortable people are with this thought of impeachment and removal of the president. It seems like, one, your opponent's caucus and your opponent, it's a mixed bag of opinions trending towards, yeah, we want to impeach the president. How do you respond to something like that? Impeachment is a very dire thing to resort to. Recently, Nancy Pelosi talked about how they're not going to seriously pursue it, but up until this point, all of our Minnesota Democrat elected congressional politicians have at least said we should look into it.
Yes.
How do you respond to that, Kendall? It's disturbing.
Yes, it is disturbing. And let me just kind of give you a historical perspective, because this is important for me. My ancestors are descendants of slaves in this country. And I would say that probably there's no other president that has universal respect than Abraham Lincoln on both sides of the party. And I'll never forget his quote. I have it on my page personally. He said, "This country, under God, has a rebirth of freedom." This was after the Gettysburg Address, after we had won that major war. That this country has a rebirth of freedom, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Well, that's right. It's our government, and it's our structure. President Trump didn't storm the White House with tanks and troops.
I must have missed that.
That's right. We voted him
in.
in. The people voted him in. And our opponents and some in the media were talking impeachment even before he sat in the seat. And it's been building all the way up until what we have now in our current day. What's disturbing is that those comments about impeachment, again, even before he sat in the seat, and I know President Trump can be bombastic with his tweets and his comments, but before he sat in the seat, that was an insult toward the people that voted him in. Like President Lincoln said, this is the government of the people, not a government of the bureaucrats, not a government of the elite media. It's ours. And they didn't like our decision. So I think they moved they advanced too far on that. If you could say jump the shark, if you will, too much on that. And this latest incident of making this inquiry of impeachment before they got a chance to see the actual whistleblowers comments, really,
which seems like pretty much discredited at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So beyond impeachment, I think CD3 more than other congressional districts, Kendall, cares about actual substantive issues and substantive things about the candidate. What are you hearing at the very ground level? What do people care about that as you're campaigning, you're actually hearing from people in Bloomington or people in Maple Grove or what have you?
Well, there's three things that it happens to coincide with my, I think, my campaign focus, if you will. This is what we have from a preliminary standpoint. Three things. One is, how do we continue the economic prosperity that we're seeing right now coming out of the Trump administration with his policies? We want to continue those, and that includes the tax reductions at corporate, because those help drive jobs and help drive profits and help drive everything down from investments. Number two is, as a Republican Party, we made a promise about health care. This is why we're seeing solutions by the Democrats, Medicare for all and all that.
Yeah. Bernie Sanders is even saying you don't ever get to keep your private plan.
Right.
We are forcing you off your private plan.
Right. And we made a commitment as a party, as the Republican Party, that we would repeal and replace, and we dropped the ball there. And I'm making a commitment that I will charge and I will work with my colleagues in Congress is, guys, when you make a promise, when you make a commitment, you fulfill it. And I spent 30 years in healthcare, half of it on the pharmaceutical side, other half on the med device side. I'm with the healthcare startup now, bringing innovative solutions. I know the underbelly of the system, and I can help deliver solutions that provide options, but market-driven solutions that drive down costs and actually improves care as well. And then the third one, this is kind of like your grandfather's politics. Okay,
all right,
your grandfather,
I'm ready.
Your grandfather and your grandmother. I would say grandparents. This is, guess what? We're approaching a debt record of that we haven't seen in like 7 to 10 years. What are we going to do about the debt? And this is the great time to address that issue when our economy is doing great. And so I can explain to everyday people why is that important for us, in my world. And we're talking trillions. I don't understand that at my pocketbook level. So my wife and I, we bought our first house when we were 22 years old. We both finished college. We thought it was great. We were celebrating because our interest rate on that mortgage was 9.5% interest rate. We were celebrating because just 6 months ago, it was 10.5%. So we actually got it down to at least single digits, from double digits. If we would equate that to today's dollars, on an average house, valued at say $350,000, that average person would be paying an additional $1,200 a month in a mortgage because the interest rates have gone up. But when you have an economy that's not stable, with high debt, you have inflation, you have other things that are going on that really impacts people's pocketbooks, but also companies have to pay higher interest. And when they have to pay higher interest, they can't employ as many employees, and they can't expand in other things that they want to do.
You brought up the debt, and I do want to touch on that because it's an issue that I'm personally passionate about as well, understanding that I think we all want our children to have a future in this country. It seems to me that it's something that we as Republicans are not talking about enough anymore. The national debt. It's funny to hear you kind of spearhead that as one of your top 3 issues, because just lately you hear less and less about it, Kendall, because I think we're so wrapped up in the news of the day and things of that nature. Why do you think an issue that critical has fallen by the wayside as part of our national discourse?
I can't give you the rationale behind it, but I can tell you what I plan on bringing to this campaign and bringing to Washington, if you will, is that energy and inspire of someone new, never in politics, but also basic blocking and tackling. This is just how business works, and this is how people manage their own personal budgets. You don't have an unlimited credit card. At some point, you got to pay that debt. You got to pay that bill, and to the point where if you wind up charging so much on it that you can't pay it off with all of your income, then you're in trouble.
Right.
I don't want us to get there. We have ways to actually address that. It's amazing. Each year we bring in more taxes than ever, and in fact, and it's incredible. The Democrats want more.
Yeah.
We bring in more taxes than we ever have in history. But it's never enough.
It's never enough.
It's never enough.
The beast is never fully satisfied.
And we're going to have to look at ways of cutting spending. And you do that when your economy's good. You don't wait till you're in crisis.
Getting back to the business experience that you bring to the table, Kendall, why are you uniquely positioned as a guy who has been in healthcare? I know you made mention before on the specific healthcare issue, but a guy who's been in business and with a military background. How do you think those things feed into a good congressperson?
Sure. I can tell you personally, I've got a chance to work with people from diverse backgrounds, different education levels, in military and both in corporate. And I was able to, from a leadership standpoint, able to harness the energies of those people, the creativity of all those people, and we were able to accomplish big things that we never thought we could accomplish by ourselves for a greater good. And we all celebrated at the end when we achieved those accomplishments. In my adult life, I've never seen us more divisive than we are today. And that's really been, I think, been driven by one side. When you divide people, you actually can control now, and now you're a leader because you can harness the negativity, you can harness the resentment, the grudges, as a leader. I tell you, on the positive side, what you see on the Republican side, you don't see the anger. You see more of optimism. You see what's great with this country. That's exactly what I plan on bringing, and not the negativity, not the harshness, not the anger, not the resentment that you often see on the other side of the aisle.
Let's say we're a few terms down the road. Kendall Qualls is our new congressperson in CD3. Kendall, looking back, let's just say 6 years from now, what do you hope people say and think about Kendall Qualls in Congress?
Yes, absolutely. So here's one of the things I would love to have for me to leave behind as a legacy, because as one of over 400 members of Congress, I can't do it alone. But what I can say, what I would like to have said, is that we were able to achieve that promise of bringing health care that everyone can agree upon. And I can tell you, this is not a political issue. This is not a Republican Democrat issue. At this point in the game, this is really an American issue that we need to address. And that was we actually got it done with me helping to lead the charge, with many members on our side of the aisle and some on the others. So that's one. The second one is that this budget thing we just talked about, we are actually stronger as a country fiscally, financially, because we're able to tackle this in good times and not wait for disaster or not wait for a crisis.
Yeah. We have just about 13, 14 months before next November when it is your election, Kendall. You talked about in the private sector being and doing things that kind of disrupt the process, and understanding that you're going to get attacked, you're going to have outside groups coming after you, all of the stuff that candidates in heated districts usually have coming up after them. what are some kind of innovative things that you're doing on the campaign trail right now to reach out to people?
Sure. So I want to keep some of that secret because I don't
Sure.
want my
Sorry,
opponents
don't give away the farm.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
My opponents to get. But you know what? We're embracing a lot of people. I think what people are going to see with our campaign is new faces coming to events, to parades. A fresh look. Also, the numbers of people that will be involved be much bigger than what we've seen. Not just in the past, but also just historically, the volume of people that want to be involved and happy to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. With the last couple of minutes here, just one question on the campaign trail as well. Has anything surprised you up to this point about the process?
It's interesting. What has probably surprised me more than anything is how many people are rooting us on. My wife and I were at the state fair for a number of days. We've been walking in parades, and I can't tell you the encouragement that we've gotten from people that are not even in the district, that are really rooting us on and really want us to do well. And you know what? I believe that most people not just want us to do well, they want the district to do well, they want our country to do well. And that's exactly what I plan on accomplishing in the role.
In that spirit of cheering you on and getting plugged in, Kendall, how can people find out more about you, get involved with your campaign, and what is your big ask? What are you looking for help with at this point?
Sure. So first thing, people can find me at kendallforcongress.com, kendallforcongress.com. And there's several ways. If you want to volunteer, the knock on doors to spread the message, we would love that. We have donors that want to donate to the campaign. That'd be great for that because we need a war chest. And other activities as far as making calls or just wanting to help and provide feedback and provide encouragement and provide suggestions to the campaign. We're taking all things, all comers.
Very good. Kendall, thank you so much for joining us on the Republican Roundtable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been the Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. Until next time.